Good morning, everybody. The status of the residents at Camp Ashraf from the Iranian dissident group MEK remains unresolved. As the December 2011 deadline approaches, the administration needs to remain vigilant that the government of Iraq lives up to its commitments to provide for the safety of the Camp Ashraf residents until a resolution of their status can be reached. We need to make it clear to the government of Iraq that there cannot be a repeat of the deadly confrontation begun last April by Iraqi security forces against Camp Ashraf residents. Another challenge is Iran's efforts to influence the political and security environment in Iraq. Iran continues to fund, train, and equip extremist groups that have targeted U.S. forces in Iraq for deadly attacks. I hope our witnesses this morning will address the capability of the Iraqi security forces and the willingness of the Maliki government to respond forcefully to attacks by these Iranian-backed groups after the withdrawal of the U.S. military forces.
Now, at the end of the day, we're at zero. Do you think the people in Camp Ashraf, do you think they're going to get killed? What's going to happen to them?
As you know, Senator, the State Department is leading an effort to ensure that...
Could I just say, finally, on the Camp Ashraf issue, I know that the Secretary of Secretary of State is addressing this issue, but it is American troops that are protecting them now. I hope that you can give us some idea as to what disposition is going to be, because I think it's very clear that the lives of these people are at risk. And I thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm just on that point, to turn it into a question, and maybe, General, this needs to be addressed to you too. There's obviously a greater risk to folks there unless the Iraqis keep a commitment. And what's going to be done to make sure, to the best of our ability, that they keep that commitment? And what about the question of removing them from the list, not them, but the organization from the terrorist list?
Well, Senator...
We're all concerned about it.
No, and we share your concern. Lloyd Austin shares the concern, and I know Ambassador Jeffries shares the concern, and there is we're not sparing any diplomatic effort to encourage the Iraqis to do what we think is right in this regard to ensure the protections of those folks in Camp Ashraf. But right now, actually, the Iraqi security forces guard Camp Ashraf with our advisory and assistance group with them, and we do leave that capacity as a real one. And but I actually think we've got to put the pressure on the Iraqi government diplomatically to have the outcome we think is correct.
Just assure them, if you would, that there's a real strong feeling around here that if they violate a commitment to protect those people, assuming that they're still there and that they're haven't been removed from the terrorist list so they can find other locations, that if they violate that commitment to us, that is going to have a severely negative impact on the relationship between I think I can speak here for the Congress, although I'm reluctant to ever say that. I think there's a lot of concern in the Congress about it, and this will, I believe, in my opinion, will severely negatively impact their relationship with the U.S. Congress. Let me leave it at that.
Senator, I want to assure you that Ambassador Jeffrey has made that loud and clear, that point loud and clear to the Iraqis.
Senator Lieberman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, that add my voice, and I think you can speak for Congress, members of both parties in both houses, in expressing our concern about the safety of the people in Camp Ashraf. You know, this is one of a series of what I'd call what-ifs, which have different answers now that we're dealing with a sovereign Iraq. And we're going to be relying, I suppose this is true whether we had troops in Iraq or not, or outside, or in the neighborhood, we're going to be relying on diplomacy, cajoling. I mean, what if there's victimization, attacks on the people in Camp Ashraf? What if Sadr, who says he wants the U.S. Embassy out of Baghdad, begins to strike at the embassy beyond the capacity of the security forces? What if What if conflict breaks out between the Kurds and the Sunni Arabs at the fault line there in the north? I think I just leave that question, but because it's an answer that's going to be spelled out in our negotiations with them. I don't know if I'm quoting somebody whose testimony in the second panel I read, but I thought it was a great quote. Maybe I got it from somebody else about diplomacy. Frederick the Great apparently said that diplomacy without military force behind it is like music without instruments.
And finally, one last challenge is the Iranian regime's attempt to influence the future of Iraq and advance its own regional ambitions. Tehran has sought to weaken Iraq by trying to undermine its political processes and, as I've mentioned, by facilitating violence against innocent Iraqi civilians and against American troops. These destabilizing actions, along with Tehran's growing ballistic missile capability and efforts to advance its nuclear program, constitute a significant threat to Iraq, the broader region, and U.S. interests. We've made very clear that we're committed to preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. And while we have strengthened our regional security relationship in recent years, Tehran's destabilizing activities have only further isolated that regime. So as we mark this new phase in our enduring partnership with Iraq, the Iranian regime is more likely than ever to be marginalized in the region and in its ability to influence the Iraqi political process. Our long-term security partnership with Iraq is part of a broader commitment by the United States to peace and security throughout the region. Our message to our allies, our friends, and our potential adversaries is very clear. We have more than 40,000 American troops that remain in the Gulf region. We're not going anywhere. And we will continue to reassure our partners, deter aggressors, and counter those seeking to create instability.